Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sky burned red in the twilight, casting long shadows over the crumbling village that lay in the valley beneath the mountain. The world, once vibrant and teeming with life, had slowly been drained of its spirit under the rule of the elemental guardians. They controlled everything: the air, the seas, the very earth itself, and humanity had become little more than a fleeting afterthought, crushed beneath the weight of their absolute dominion. Merlin crouched at the edge of a ridge, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the pulse of the earth beneath him, not from the tremor of the guardian's power but from something far more delicate, something he had unlocked through years of study and painful sacrifice. The elements could be understood, controlled, manipulated, even by humans. The guardians had lied. They had preached their superiority for centuries, and no one had questioned it, until now. Merlin's fingers traced the worn leather strap of the satchel at his side, inside which lay the delicate vials and notes that held the key to humanity's salvation. He had done it. He had broken the code, combined alchemy with the raw power of the elements. It was a dangerous gamble, but one he knew would change the course of history. "Merlin," came a voice behind him, low and urgent. It was Elena, her armor dented from the last skirmish, her eyes hard from years of fighting. He turned to her, noting the fire in her gaze that had never waned, even after all they had endured. "Is everything in place?" She nodded. "The others are ready. Darius has managed to hide the weaponry inside the supply carts. We'll strike at dawn." Merlin stood, his cloak catching the wind. "Good. The Earth Guardian won't see it coming." Elena's jaw tightened. "Are you sure we're ready for this? We've never attacked one of the Guardians directly before." Merlin's gaze drifted to the distant outline of the Earth Guardian's fortress, carved into the mountainside like a jagged wound. The Guardian ruled over the forests and stone, his reach extending across the land. Taking him down would send a message to the others, and to the world. "We have no choice," Merlin said, his voice calm but resolute. "If we don't fight back now, we'll be crushed under their boot forever. This is our moment, Elena. We have the power to change everything." She held his gaze for a long moment before nodding, her shoulders squaring. "Then let's make sure we win." The Earth Guardian's fortress loomed above them at dawn, a towering structure of rock and vine, its gates sealed tight, as though it had never known the touch of war. The Earth Guardian had grown complacent, as all the Guardians had. They believed themselves untouchable, beyond the reach of humanity's feeble efforts. Today, that illusion would shatter. Merlin stood at the head of the small army he had gathered: farmers, blacksmiths, scholars, all united by one common cause: to break free of the elemental guardian's tyranny. Darius, his closest advisor and one of the few who truly understood the fusion of science and magic, stood beside him. "The explosives are ready," Darius whispered. "Once we blow the outer wall, we'll have an opening." Merlin nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The plan was risky. They had to strike quickly before the Earth Guardian could summon his full strength. If they hesitated, they'd be buried alive by the force of his wrath. "Now," Merlin ordered. In an instant, the air was filled with the deafening roar of explosives as the gates of the fortress were blown apart. Shouts rang out, and Merlin's rebels surged forward, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. Merlin raised his hand, feeling the surge of elemental energy he had learned to control. Fire and earth collided in a brilliant display of power. As Merlin directed the elements to his will, the Earth Guardian emerged from the rubble, towering over the battlefield, his body made of living stone, his eyes burning with fury. "You dare defy me?" he roared, his voice shaking the earth beneath their feet. Merlin stepped forward, unflinching. "Your reign is over," he declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Humanity will no longer bow to your kind." The Earth Guardian's laugh was like the grinding of stones. "You are nothing but ants before me. I am the foundation of this world. Without me, you would be crushed under the weight of your own hubris." Merlin's hands glowed with the energy he had learned to harness. "You're wrong. We've learned the truth. The elements are not yours to control. They belong to all of us." With a flick of his wrist, Merlin sent a wave of molten earth crashing into the Earth Guardian. The Guardian staggered, taken aback by the sheer force of the attack. It was the first time a human had struck him with such power, and it showed. The battle raged on, but Merlin knew they were running out of time. The other Guardians would soon hear of the attack, and if they didn't bring the Earth Guardian down soon, reinforcements would arrive, and all would be lost. "Elena," Merlin called, spotting her in the thick of the fight. She was locked in combat with one of the Guardian's stone soldiers, her sword flashing as she parried each blow. She glanced back at him, her face grim. "What is it?" "We need to finish this now," Merlin said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Elena nodded, her face set with determination. She fought her way toward Merlin, her eyes never leaving the towering form of the Earth Guardian. Together, they unleashed a final, devastating attack, combining their strengths. The ground shook, and with a deafening roar, the Earth Guardian fell, his body crumbling into dust. Silence fell over the battlefield as the rebels stared at the fallen Guardian, disbelief etched on their faces. They had done it. They had defeated one of the elemental overlords, but there was no time to celebrate. Merlin turned to the others, his voice ringing out over the stunned crowd. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with both triumph and warning. "The other Guardians will come for us now. We must be ready." The fire flickered in the small cave where Merlin and his closest allies had taken refuge. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, but inside, all was quiet. Darius sat by the fire, his brow furrowed as he pored over the scrolls and notes spread out before him. "This isn't sustainable," he muttered. "We've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with elemental synthesis. If we're going to face the other Guardians, we need more time." "We don't have time," Merlin said, pacing restlessly near the entrance. "The Fire Guardian will come for us next, and he won't be as easily caught off guard as the Earth Guardian was." Elena, sitting with her back to the wall, looked up from sharpening her sword. "We should strike first," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "Take the fight to him before he has a chance to regroup." Merlin stopped pacing and looked at her, his mind racing. The idea had merit. They couldn't afford to sit and wait for the Fire Guardian to launch an attack on their terms. But striking first would be risky. It would require all the strength and resources they had left. "We need more allies," Merlin said finally. "The elemental Guardians are not without enemies. If we can find others who have suffered under their rule, we might stand a chance." "Like who?" Elena asked, raising an eyebrow. "There are rumors," Merlin said, lowering his voice. "Rumors of creatures, beings who were cast out by the Guardians long ago. The sylphs, the air spirits, and the trolls of the deep earth. If we can find them, convince them to join us, we might have the numbers we need." Elena's lips thinned. "And if they refuse?" Merlin's eyes darkened. "Then we'll find a way to fight without them." The Fire Guardian struck with the force of a tempest. The village was gone in an instant, consumed by roaring flames that leapt and twisted through the air like living creatures. People screamed as the firestorm swept over them, their homes turned to ash in the blink of an eye. Merlin watched from the outskirts, his fists clenched at his sides. This was the price of defying the Guardians. The Fire Guardian, the most brutal and unpredictable of the five, had wasted no time in delivering his punishment. "He's sending a message," Darius said quietly, standing beside Merlin. Merlin nodded grimly. "And we need to respond." "But how?" The Fire Guardian's power was unmatched. He could reduce entire cities to cinders with a single thought. Facing him head-on would be suicide. "We'll need to be smarter than that," Merlin muttered. "We can't outfight him. But maybe we can outthink him." Elena joined them, her face hard with anger. "We strike now," she said. "Before he does more damage." Merlin shook his head. "No. We're not ready." "Not yet." Elena bristled. "And how many more villages will burn while we wait?" Merlin didn't answer. His mind was racing, searching for a solution. Then, an idea struck him, a dangerous, reckless idea, but one that just might work. "We lure him into a trap," Merlin said slowly. "We use his arrogance against him." Darius frowned. "How?" Merlin turned to face them, a glint of determination in his eyes. "We give him what he wants. He's hunting us, hunting me. So we let him find us. But when he does, we'll be ready." Merlin's mind buzzed with the growing tension in the air as the rebels prepared for the Fire Guardian's inevitable arrival. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only way to gain the upper hand against a foe whose sheer power could obliterate entire towns. Merlin knew the Fire Guardian's pride, his arrogance in believing no one could ever match him, was their greatest asset. The rebels gathered in the ruins of an ancient forest, scorched by previous battles with the elemental forces. Here, Merlin had prepared the trap, weaving together the scientific principles of alchemy and the raw, untapped power of elemental energy. The key was to turn the Fire Guardian's own strength against him, and Merlin had spent countless hours fine-tuning the volatile mixture he hoped would do the job. Elena approached, her armor still battered from their previous fights, her sword at the ready. "Everything's in place," she said, her voice low and controlled. "The scouts have reported movement. He's coming." Merlin didn't look at her, his focus entirely on the intricate symbols drawn in the ash-covered dirt. These symbols, carved with precision and infused with the elemental essence he had spent years mastering, would be the trigger. "He'll come for me first," Merlin said. "He wants to prove his dominance. That's where we'll strike." Darius knelt beside him, adjusting the vials of alchemical compounds he had helped refine. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "This isn't just about defeating the Fire Guardian, Merlin. If we miscalculate, we could all go up in flames." Merlin paused, his fingers brushing the cold earth as he closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the thrum of power beneath the surface. "It will work," he said with quiet conviction. "It has to." The air shifted, a low hum building in the distance as the temperature rose. The wind, once gentle, now carried with it the scent of burning wood and sulfur. The Fire Guardian was close. Merlin stood, his heart pounding in time with the elements he had learned to manipulate. "Positions." Merlin ordered, and the rebels quickly moved into formation. They were vastly outnumbered and outmatched in terms of raw power, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in strategy and ingenuity. The trap would only work if they could hold their ground long enough to spring it. A roar ripped through the sky, and flames lit the horizon. The Fire Guardian appeared, his towering form wreathed in flames, his eyes burning with contempt. His voice boomed across the battlefield, shaking the earth. "You think you can defy me, mortal?" he sneered. "I will burn you and your rebellion to ash, as I have done to all who have dared oppose the elemental order." Merlin stepped forward, his cloak billowing in the intense heat. "Your time is over, Guardian," he called back, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "The elements are not yours to control. You've held humanity down for too long, and now we will rise." The Fire Guardian laughed, the sound like crackling flames. "Rise? You are nothing. You will be consumed by the fire, as all who challenge the natural order are." With a wave of his hand, the Fire Guardian sent a wall of fire surging toward Merlin and the rebels. The heat was unbearable, and the ground beneath them scorched and cracked. But Merlin was ready. He raised his hand, and with a gesture, the elemental trap sprang to life. The symbols in the dirt glowed, and a massive burst of energy erupted from the earth, creating a shield that deflected the flames. The Fire Guardian's eyes widened in surprise as his attack faltered. "Impossible," he bellowed, but Merlin didn't stop. With another motion, he directed the energy of the trap toward the Guardian, funneling the elemental power back at him. For the first time, the Fire Guardian staggered, his flames flickering as the energy struck him. But his arrogance quickly turned to rage, and he retaliated with a fury unlike anything Merlin had ever seen. Fireballs rained down on the rebels, and the ground beneath them erupted in flames. "Elena, now!" Merlin shouted, and Elena, leading the charge, rallied the rebels into action. They attacked in coordinated waves, using the environment to their advantage, striking quickly and retreating before the Fire Guardian could react. The battle was a delicate dance, and every movement had to be perfectly timed. As the Fire Guardian unleashed another torrent of flames, Merlin focused all his energy on maintaining the trap, drawing on every ounce of knowledge he had gained through years of studying the elements. The alchemical mixture was holding, but only just. Darius, positioned near the edge of the battlefield, called out, "We're running out of time, Merlin. The trap won't hold much longer." Merlin knew he was right. The Fire Guardian's power was immense, and the longer the fight dragged on, the more dangerous it became. They needed to end it. "Now, Elena, take your team and draw him toward the center," Merlin commanded, his voice tight with concentration. "We need him inside the circle." Elena nodded and charged forward, leading a group of rebels in a daring assault that caught the Fire Guardian off guard. They dodged and weaved through the flames, using their speed and agility to avoid the worst of his attacks. The Fire Guardian, enraged by their defiance, pursued them, unaware that he was being lured directly into the heart of Merlin's trap. The glowing symbols beneath the earth pulsed brighter as the elemental energy built to a critical level. Merlin gritted his teeth, every muscle in his body straining as he channeled the last of his power into the trap. "Now!" he shouted, with a deafening roar. The elemental trap detonated, releasing a massive surge of energy that enveloped the Fire Guardian. Flames and smoke filled the air as the ground shook violently. The force of the explosion knocked Merlin to the ground, and for a moment, there was only chaos. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was eerily silent. The Fire Guardian lay at the center of the devastation, his once mighty form reduced to a smoldering ruin. The rebels stood in stunned disbelief, their victory hard-won and bittersweet. Merlin slowly pushed himself to his feet, his body aching from the exertion. He looked at the fallen Fire Guardian and felt no triumph, only the weight of what was to come. This victory, while monumental, was only the beginning. The other Guardians would not take this lightly. Elena approached him, her expression unreadable. "We did it," she said, but there was no joy in her voice, only exhaustion. Merlin nodded, wiping sweat and ash from his brow. "For now," he replied. But the hardest part is still ahead. They returned to their camp that night, their numbers fewer than they had been at dawn. The battle had taken its toll, but the rebellion had won a crucial victory. Word of the Fire Guardians' defeat would spread, and it would only be a matter of time before the other Guardians responded. As they regrouped, Darius came to sit beside Merlin. "You know what's coming next," he said quietly. "The Ether Guardian will not allow this to continue. He's the most powerful of them all. If we challenge him, I know," Merlin said softly. He had been preparing for this moment ever since the rebellion had begun. The Ether Guardian was different from the others, more measured, more thoughtful, but also more dangerous. He controlled the balance of the elements, and without him, the entire world could fall into chaos. "We have no choice," Merlin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to finish what we started. We can't let them keep controlling us." Darius nodded, though his eyes were filled with concern. "And if we succeed? What then? What happens to the balance of the world if the Guardians are gone?" Merlin stared into the fire, the flickering flames reflecting in his eyes. He didn't have an answer. All he knew was that humanity couldn't live in chains any longer. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The final confrontation with the Ether Guardian loomed on the horizon, and Merlin knew it would be the fight that decided the fate of the world. The next morning, they set out for the Elemental Citadel, the ancient fortress where the Ether Guardian and the remaining elemental rulers had gathered. The journey was long and perilous, through desolate lands where the elements themselves seemed to rebel against their presence. Storms raged, the seas churned, and the very earth seemed to tremble beneath their feet. When they arrived at the citadel, it was as if they had stepped into another world. The air was thick with elemental energy, the walls of the fortress shimmering with the power that had been infused into them over millennia. At the heart of the citadel stood the Ether Guardian, his form almost intangible, like a being made of pure light and air. "I have been expecting you," the Ether Guardian said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "You have upset the balance, Merlin. Do you truly understand what you have done?" Merlin stepped forward, his eyes locked on the Ether Guardian's ethereal form. "I've freed humanity from your tyranny," he said, his voice steady. "We will no longer be slaves to the elements." The Ether Guardian regarded him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "And what will you do with this freedom? Without the balance we maintain, your world will descend into chaos. Is that what you wish?" Merlin clenched his fists. "We'll find our own way." The Ether Guardian sighed, a sound like the wind through the trees. "Very well. But know this, if you destroy me, you destroy the balance. The world as you know it will cease to exist." Merlin hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was what it had all come down to, the final choice. He could either continue the fight and risk plunging the world into chaos, or he could walk away and leave the elemental order intact. Elena stepped up beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Whatever you choose, we're with you," she said quietly. Merlin closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped forward. "I won't become what you are," he said, his voice firm. "I won't rule through fear. But I also won't let you keep us in chains." With that, he unleashed the full power of the elemental synthesis he had perfected. The energy surged through him, wrapping around the Ether Guardian in a brilliant display of light and force. The Guardian resisted, but even he couldn't withstand the combination of human ingenuity and elemental power. With a final, blinding flash, the Ether Guardian was gone, his essence scattered to the winds. The world trembled, the elements shifting, but the worst of the chaos never came. Instead, The skies cleared, and the land seemed to settle into a new, uncertain peace. Merlin stood at the center of it all, the weight of the rebellion lifted but replaced with the burden of what came next. Humanity was free, but the future was unknown. "We'll rebuild," Merlin said softly, looking at Elena and Darius. "We'll find a new balance." The rebellion was over, but their work had only just begun.